Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryankaravavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti.
No.
Yeah. Yes.
You said that you pray only Kula Devata and Nishta Devata. And you don't go on spiritual tourism in herds. It's meant only for contemplators and brahmachari who completed their education of being children.
Where did I say that? Where was it said?
2 weeks ago.
In the context of? Okay.
Gods, but you pray only Ishta Devata and Kula Devata. You don't
No.
tourism, spiritual tourism.
That's not. See, the question that she is asking is.
For contemplators and brahmachari. If you go on.
The question that she is asking is. The very nature of worshipping gods. The very nature of worshipping gods as in going on this spiritual tourism. What is it all about? Traditionally, we don't go on the spiritual tours. 15-day tours to 27 temples, 5-day tours to 45 temples. We don't do that because we have two gods already. We have two gods. One is the family deity, another is your personal deity. So all worships is restricted only to these two. Those who take up to this path of contemplation and where they want seclusion, they go on this Rishikesh and Kedarnath and Badrinath and all that. Today, everybody keeps, because of the sheer accessibility, the transport facility and all that, everybody goes there, polluting that place and coming back, which is absolutely not necessary. You go, it's like going on Kailash tour has become a, it's like, I don't know, even here there are so many spiritual people here. I am very unspiritual compared to them because they all have gone to Kailash, Mansarovar, and they also get me something from Mansarovar, Kailash. Today, though, that doesn't become, that has got nothing to do with bhakti. That has got nothing to do with devotion because it is becoming more like a picnic. See, somebody wants to go sightseeing. It is a sensual act. That's what I said. It's an act of sensuality. Everybody wants to do sightseeing. You want to say, you want to bring in a spiritual flavor to our sightseeing by saying, I am visiting. I only visit pilgrimage places, sir. I don't go anywhere else. And then he is counting what all he has not yet gone for. He is counting where all he has gone and he is counting where all he didn't go for. For which I said, bhakti, pilgrimages has got nothing to do with this. Are you able to follow? It is to do with something inspires you about the infinite. That inspiration is your symbolic. That's what we saw last class. Gods and God and gods. Symbolic. Something symbolically inspires you regarding the infinite. You keep that as your central point of emotion, and you divert your emotions towards that. It's as simple as that. Instead of doing this, they go on this pilgrimages, which is not what the Shastras have recommended at any point of time. Those who are interested in gaining knowledge will go to Kashi. Or those who want to die there, they'll go. Nobody will go there, spend half a day and come back. Take the flight, land there, finish off everything, take the evening flight and come back. That's not the way it is. It was done. Today everybody is doing everything. So that is not the way in which it is done. You follow? What is given as symbolism, if you take it literally, you have a problem. Symbols are not to be taken literally. That's all the whole idea is. It is given to you as a symbol. If you take it literally, you have a difficulty. What is the difficulty? Your entire concept of divinity will be restricted to that symbol. And anything other than that will look, what is opposite of divine? Demonical, huh? I don't know. It will start appearing that way. If you take divine only to be that symbol. If symbol is understood as a representation, you will not have this problem. If symbol is taken as a representation, you will not have this problem. But generally people don't take it symbolically, they take it literally. And when you take it literally, then you have this confusion. So here we are saying you have to take it symbolically, not literally. Symbols are needed. Without symbols, you cannot proceed. That's why they say symbols becomes a necessary tool for knowing. Without symbols, you cannot learn. But then at the same time, symbols should not be taken literally. And over the period of time, symbols will become literal. Over a period of time, what will happen? That's called conditioning. When symbols are taken to be literally true, this is called conditioning. The same Vedas, Vedanta that gives the symbols is the same Vedas that ridicules that also. Why they give it and then why do they have to ridicule it? Might as well not give it, no. Why give it and create a confusion and then ridicule it? Might as well say all this is useless, don't go to this. They don't say that. Why? It is needed at one point of time. Symbols are needed. But if the tendency is to start taking it literally. And if you start taking it literally, your concept of divine becomes narrow to that symbol. Your concept of divine becomes narrow to that symbol, and your concept of divine becomes narrow to the group who agrees with you on the same symbol. This is where sect are born, sectarian, fanaticism. This is how it is born. Those who are in the name of liberal, they don't see divine at all anywhere. So either we go to this extreme or we go to that extreme. Those in the name of being liberals, they don't see divine at all anywhere. You use a symbol to remember the divine. You use a symbol. And your focus should be on what? Using the symbol and remembering something beyond the symbol. That's why the simple example he gives, saluting the national flag and doing anti-national activities. You salute the national flag is symbolic. You salute the flag and you do anti-national activities, what is the point? It's a piece of cloth. From one angle, it is a piece of cloth. From another angle, it is not the piece of cloth. So from what angle you look, that matters. And when the tailor is stitching it, his feet is on the national flag, no? When the tailor is stitching, his feet is on the national flag. Otherwise, how can he stitch? But then you can't say that he is insulting the national flag or insulting the nation. If I stamp on it, it is insulting the nation. Are you able to follow? So you use the symbol, but you don't take it literally. If you take it literally, your concept of divine gets restricted to the deity, to that group, and everything else will start looking anti. I don't know. The opposite of divine is non-divine. I don't know. Demonical. Are you able to follow? Is it okay? We'll read the text. Finite is infinite.
Finite is infinite. The above plan of the spiritual masters has succeeded in raising the spiritual awareness of the devotional aspirants. Thereby, they could instill the thought of divinity in the aspirants even while they were engaged in fulfilling their mundane desires. But this exercise has had little effect on the intellectual seekers. The intellectuals would also need to maintain constancy of thought of God in and through their activities. They would require subtler exercises for elevating spiritual awareness. Such of those aspirants are directed to scrutinize the finite world in detail. By fine-tuning the study and investigation of the finite, one would stand aghast at the findings. The finite presents itself as infinite. It may sound paradoxical, but stands to reason. Examine the four kingdoms: the mineral, vegetable, animal, and human. Study them carefully. Analyze their nature thoroughly. You would notice the infinite ingrained in the finite. The mineral kingdom is made up of matter, and matter is constituted of atoms. An atom is so minute yet packed with enormous power. The nuclear explosion speaks eloquent of it. Just imagine all the power contained in the countless atoms in matter. It would be infinite. The vegetable kingdom also displays infinite expression. A single seed can generate an endless chain of trees and seeds. Sow a seed in the earth, it grows into a tree. A tree produces numerous seeds. These seeds, in turn, can produce countless trees and seeds. The chain goes on endlessly. Just imagine all these emerging from one seed. The seed is thus packed with infinite potential, infinite power. You perceive the infinite concealed in the finite. So it is with the animal world. The wise see the infinite portrayed in the finite. A cat produces a litter of kittens. The kittens grow up into cats. These cats again produce many more litters of kittens. Thus, the progeny goes on endlessly. Innumerable cats emanating from a single cat. The same principle holds good for the human species too. A single human being can generate an endless progeny. You may be finite, but you display infinite potency and power. You would accept this infinite capacity in a human with respect to the past and future, but find it difficult to accept the same with regard to the present. At present, you consider yourself to be a finite being with limited power and strength. This is not true. Even with respect to your present status, you seem to possess immense capacity, immeasurable potency, and power. A deeper study and scrutiny of the human personality would reveal the same phenomenon occurring in the present as well. Analyze your day's activities. You execute countless actions throughout the day. Your eyes see the objects and beings of the world. Each time you see an object, you subject the cells of your eyes to a series of actions before the sight is registered. M. Mitchell Wardrop writes in Science 85 in USA. Consider the capabilities involved in strolling down the road, leaving aside such things as balance and coordination. You still have to see where you are going, which means you somehow have to make sense out of the ever changing swirl of motion and color and light and shadow. To accomplish this, you have at your command roughly 100 million receptor cells, the rods and cones, in the retina of each eye. The retina also contains four other layers of nerve cells. Altogether, the system probably makes the equivalent of 10,000 million calculations a second before the image information even gets to the optic nerve. And once the visual data reaches the brain, the cerebral cortex has more than a dozen separate vision centers in which to process it. In fact, it has been estimated that vision in one form or another involves some 60% of the cortex. Of course, you remain blissfully unaware of all this. You simply glance across the street and say, "Oh, there's Sally." Besides your eyes seeing, the other sense organs are also busy with their respective activities. They are again innumerable, countless. These activities are all yours. You have produced them. Furthermore, your mind entertains numberless feelings, emotions. You produce each one of them. So also your intellect conceives endless thoughts. You produce them all. Besides these, you are responsible for respiration and perspiration, eating and evacuating, digestion and distribution of food, etc. Countless cells in your body, hair on your skin, blood in your arteries and veins are all functioning through you. At this very moment, you are producing infinite actions. Remember this through your life. Discover this truth. What you consider as finite is actually infinite in nature. You must recognize your innate nature. You are not a finite, limited, constricted being as you believe yourself to be. You are infinite. You are God Almighty. That is the truth. Hold that view at any cost. Get to the reality of life. Assert yourself. I'm all. I'm everything. The microcosm and the macrocosm are in me. I'm infinite. God.
This conscious assertion is called nididhyasana, where you assert that you are God. It's a practice. Now it may look very silly. Now it may look very funny also. You may not even want to do it now, because not even enough Shravana and Manana is done to get to that conviction. You have done enough Shravana, and if you have done reflection on what you have heard, nididhyasana becomes the practice. And this is nididhyasana. What is it? From saying I am impure to pure, you say I am pure already. Now don't try all this. Don't try. You can try. Nothing will help. Nothing will work. It's not that you should not try. You can try. It will not help. Because you can't keep saying I am pure, 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 and then you close the book. So the dvesha, bhaya, all that comes. Krodha comes, bhaya comes, dvesha comes, and then you say I am pure. It doesn't. That's not the way it is. It's done. Therefore, the first thing is this is the practice of nididhyasana. Whatever the last paragraph is, I am. Hold that view at any cost. Get to the reality of life. Assert yourself. I am all. I am everything. The microcosm and macrocosm are in me. I am infinite. I am God. Ramtirtha says, scream this from the top of your voice, he says. Go to the rooftops and scream on top of your voice, saying I am infinite. I am God. If any one of you do and get into trouble, don't say class la sonnaanga, don't say. Don't say this is what you are told to do in the class. So it's a state of proper understanding. The God and gods and all this caters to the predominantly devotional type. The finite is infinite, cater predominantly to the intellectual type. There are two, both needs, both has to remind themselves about God. The devotional remembers God through whatever we have discussed. Now, how does the intellectual, what is the exercise for the intellectual to seek God, to remember God? You can't tell them go and do the devotional practices. Please understand two things here that is very important to understand. Devotional is not inferior and intellectual is superior. Number one. Number two, because we are all sitting and doing these intellectual exercises doesn't mean we are all superior either. Yeah. Because clarity didn't even come at the Sravana level. So there is one set of practices for the emotional and there is another set of practices for the intellectual. Since a human being is a combination of both, you need to employ both. So finite is infinite. These two words, finite and infinite, always have very deep subject matter of mathematicians and philosophers. This finite and infinite was always a subject matter of inquiry for these two classes, mathematicians and the philosophers. Meaning, they are the intellectual class. If a person is interested in mathematics and a person is interested in philosophy, they are the intellectual class. So they have these two, finite and infinite. Finite is that which is defined. Finite is that which can be defined. Infinite is that which cannot be defined. So the paradox, what is that topic? Finite is infinite. Wrong. Finite can never be infinite, isn't it? But then he says paradoxically, it is the case based on deeper observation. Infinite comes from the Latin word. Etymologically, infinite has the Latin origin. Infinis. Finis means that which has a boundary. Infinis means that which is beyond boundaries. Finite is measurable. Infinite is which is immeasurable. Finite means measurable. You can measure. Infinite is that which cannot be measured. So, what is the nature of the finite and what is the nature of infinite has been a thought that has been deeply interesting a set of people. Those set of people who are naturally inclined to this kind of subject is called intellectuals. Because it is very abstract by, why it is called intellectuals? Because it is abstract by nature. Practically, sir, Nale, you are not intellectual. That's all it is. Please understand that. But practically, sir, no, you can safely understand that you are not an intellectual, because an intellectual is one who is interested in the abstract. A active person or an emotional person is one who is interested in. Okay, sir. Okay. At the end of the day, what is the use of all this? What is the use of it? First to say that. First to talk about that. So, who is an intellectual? First thing, that how do you know whether you are an intellectual or not, you can deal with the abstract. You have a natural inclination towards the abstract. And what is the abstract? Infinite is that abstract. For finite is not abstract. For finite is defined, measurable, clear, precise, perfect. I don't know what all I said. Yeah, Flola, I said something, isn't it? Defined, precise, measurable, perfect. All this is finite. Now, infinite is exactly the opposite. Because it cannot be defined, it cannot be measured. Anything that can be defined, measured, have a fixed property, have a fixed quality, therefore it is perfect. Infinite is that which doesn't have a fixed property, which doesn't have a fixed quality. And don't say it is imperfect. Don't say finite, don't infinite is imperfect. Even though when you go to higher studies in mathematics, they will talk about that. Even though when you go to, even in MSc, they will teach you that. It is imperfect. Because perfect means that can be measured, fixed. If something can't be measured and fixed, not imperfection as in indeterminable, mathematical terms. Imperfect as in indeterminable. So there is this intellectual class and then there is this emotional class. And then there is the third category, active class. And then the fourth category, Vedanta class. There's the fourth category. That's the category. It doesn't come whether it comes from the active class or emotional class or intellectual class, Vedanta class.
Balanced class.
Yeah. Because in the category, we don't know where to even put this category. So, for emotional class, God and God's help in remembering the divine. For the intellectual class, abstract. What is the abstract? Abstraction meaning deeper observation, deeper penetration. You can't be a casual, superficial observer. You can't have a superficial knowledge. Abstract means deeper, penetrative vision. That's what is called abstract. What is deeper penetrative vision? Examples are given. What is example? Look at the mineral kingdom, look at the animal plant kingdom, look at the animal kingdom, look at the human species. You observe them so minutely. And you observe them so minutely, they come up with something which ordinarily people cannot conceive of. Like, take the example here, the science example, where he's talking about the sight. He says, probably 10,000 million calculations a second. Probably. Probably means it can be more than that also. This is the first indicator of an abstract person. The first indicator of an abstract person is they always talk in probability only. Probably, maybe, might be. For an emotional active person, this language itself is very annoying, very confusing. Are you able to see the difference? For an active emotional person, this language of probably is very annoying. You say, why can't you be? Yeah, why can't you be precise? Say, I know that it is 100,000, 10,000 million calculations. Why can't you say probably? These are all indicators to know whether what kind of a personality you are. As we are discussing this, I am giving you some hidden tips also to know where you to assess. Otherwise, what happens is, because sitting in this class, you will start thinking that you are intellectual and stop doing all the devotional practices. So you don't remember God here, you don't remember God there also. At least you are better off before coming to the class. At least you are doing something before coming to the class. Now that is also gone. That is not the intent. Are you able to follow? So what is abstract? Abstract means where they talk the language of probability. Maybe you can look at it like that. Probably it will work like this. Looks like you yourself is not sure. An intellectual, a person of an abstract type will never be sure. Not that he is a confused person. Please don't, not that he is a confused person. That's why it is very difficult to explain who is an intellectual class first. Not that, don't think that, okay, he himself is not sure now, looks like he's a very confused person. No, it's not a confused person. The very intellectual means one who is comfortable with abstract, one who is comfortable with the very language itself is very different to them. That's what you should recognize. Are you able to follow? With this idea, with this with this background, we will see what is finite is infinite. In Kathopanishad, he calls it as Ascharya. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna quotes that in chapter 2, verse number 69. He quotes that Kathopanishad verse. Ascharya, Ascharya, Ascharya. Wonderment, wonderment, wonderment. That wonderment is finite, is infinite. When you are in that state of wonderment, that is finite is infinite. If only the bank balance is bringing wonderment, what do we do? We are also in wonderment. But what brings wonderment to us? Oh, so much. Wow. Isn't it? Wonderment. Nowadays they call it as wow feeling, isn't it? You should say wow. And then something else will say. So the next generation will come and say something, something else. What is finite is infinite. Whatsoever you see as clear, precise, definite is not that. That is finite is infinite. It 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 on deeper penetration, you transcend the finite and the intellect is wonderstruck at the infinite. That is how the intellectual remembers God. You transcend the finite, you penetrate. Transcend means you penetrate deeper. You penetrate deeper and deeper and deeper into the finite, and the intellect is wonderstruck at the infinite magnitude in everything. It can be the power of an atom, or it can be the power of what they call as black hole. No, when the entire universe dies, it goes into that. It is diminishing, 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 diminishing. On superficial logical observation, we'll say diminish, 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 and it should end in where it should end. Anybody? No, purila sir. Nothing is understandable. What you are saying, nothing is understandable. If you go on reducing, where it will end up finally?
Nothingness.
It should end up in a zero, logically speaking. Black hole says the entire power is into that. Entire manifestation of the universe with this giant, what energy it has, what power, what energy, what strength it has, all that goes into that. It means that infinite power in that temporarily exploded as this. That infinite power temporarily exploded as this huge finite cosmos, even though it is transcending our human comprehension. When you understand that, your intellect is not confused. Your intellect is wonderstruck. Ascharya. So the intellectual way of remembering the divine is through wonderment. And that wonderment comes through deeper penetrative analysis. That is what the topic. Finite is infinite. So from each and one kingdom is giving one example. From the matter, he is giving the example of an atom. The vegetable kingdom, a seed. One seed has the potential to bring about. One seed has the potential to vegetate the entire earth. One seed has that potential. It means what you see as finite in reality is infinite. What you see as finite in reality, is infinite. So it is with the animal kingdom. So it is with the human species. When you look at the world, it is called macrocosmic ascharya. When you look at the individual, it is called microcosmic ascharya. But both are ascharya, both are wonderment. So you can go into the wonderment looking at your own self, or you can go into this wonderment looking at the macrocosm. You can go into this wonderment, or you can go into this wonderment looking at the microcosm. Idea is get to that state of wonderment. That's all. What is the idea? Idea is get to that state of wonderment. In that wonderment, what happens? When you are in that state of wonderment, what happens? The ego just melts away. The ego simply melts, disappears. Ego simply disappears, melts. And when that ego is thus melted, disappeared, you can go to the rooftop and cry and shout. You can go to the rooftop and cry and shout. What are you supposed to shout? I am God. Shankar. Kolattur Shankar. Shout panungo. Yeah, go to the rooftop and shout. I am God. Because the wonderment has melted the ego. All that means is how to make the human being remember the divine according to that individual nature, intellectual nature, emotional nature, active nature, how to remember the divine. So in the initial stages, how does it work? In the initial stages, a mighty expression helps. The initial stages, extraordinary expression helps. And then as you grow, even smaller expressions becomes divine. When you reach a height, just breathing in and breathing out itself is so, it becomes a wonderment. You go to sleep and wake up itself is a wonderment. Yeah, going to sleep is a wonderment. Waking up is another wonderment. Everything in, so you are in that constant state of wonderment. Sir, what will I do? Supposing if I am in the state of constant wonderment, what will I do after that? No, don't worry. Come to the other state. We will discuss it from the angle because it is not for. Yeah, you don't belong to this category. That's all. It's very clear. Are you able to follow? Constantly in that wonderment state, sir. How will I get my breakfast? Yeah, that is our role. Yeah. After wonderment, we are worried about. We are worried about how the breakfast will come, how the food will come, what will happen. Are you able to follow? Wonderment is recognizing the insignificance. What is wonderment? Wonderment is recognizing the insignificance. Once you understand it as insignificance, what value you will have towards that? That is called finite is infinite. To break the arrogance of the intellect, that much deeper penetration is required. Because the arrogance of the intellect is I know or I can know. The arrogance of the intellect is of two. One is I know or I can know. Just give me some time, sir. I will know everything. Are you able to follow these two? Ascharya, wonderment, the finite is infinite, breaks that arrogance of that knowing. Etad jnanam iti proktam. He gives a definition of jnanam, what is knowledge, in the 13th chapter. In fact, in the entire Gita, that is the only place he defines what jnanam is. Etad jnanam iti proktam, he says. In the 13th chapter, he defines what is jnanam. And what is jnanam? Knowledge means knowledge of a subject. Knowledge, generally the word knowledge means knowledge of a particular subject or knowledge of a few subjects. But definitely it is knowledge. So here he says, Etad jnanam, know this to be knowledge, Arjuna. And what he defines as knowledge is 20 qualities. Amanitvam, adambitvam, ahimsa, kshanti, arjavam. Etad, this is jnanam. And of all this, the first indicator, the first indicator to know, 20 indicators he gives to check whether you have knowledge or not. I am a knowledgeable person, sir. No certificate in the, if you have a certificate, that is not accepted as knowledge. 20 indicators in this comes in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. 20 indicators to say what is knowledge. And the very first indicator is humility. And the very first indicator of knowledge is humility. And humility comes from where I can never know. Humility comes from where I break the two arrogance. What is arrogance that you break? I know. Either I know or I can know. All questions arise from that possibility that I can know. We'll keep asking questions, sir. Don't stop. Yeah. You cannot stop. As long as the mind is there, the doubts will be there. Questions will keep. So, what is humility? Humility comes when the intellect understands that what I can know, what I know, what I can know individually or collectively, all human intellects put together, the past, present, and the future, all are limited. And you go deeper and you penetrate deeper. And when you penetrate deeper, upon what you will penetrate? You have only finite to penetrate. Through penetrating the finite, you recognize the infinite concealed. That is the intellectual exercise. That's how the intellectual remembers the divine. What you have is only the finite. So you necessarily have to use the finite only. Knowledge proceeds from known to the unknown. What do you have is the finite that is known. Using that known, you penetrate deeper into that known. Where do you end up? You end up in that infinite. You end up in that infinite. Traditionally, when you study the Upanishads, the first Upanishad is Isavasya Upanishad. They start the study with Isavasya. And the very invocatory prayer of Isavasyam is a very intellectual prayer. Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vasishyate. It is infinite. It is infinite. It is infinite. Isavasyam idam sarvam. This world is nothing but Isha, the Lord. Isha means Lord. The world is not. Now, all these are intellectual exercises for the purpose of remembering the divine. For the purpose of remembering the divine. So, an intellectual remembers the divine by the process of penetrating the finite, and when he goes deeper and deeper and deeper, it becomes clearer and clearer and clearer. What becomes clearer and clearer when you go deeper and deeper? What becomes clearer and clearer when you go deeper and deeper? You can never know. Therefore, you start talking the language of probably, might be, maybe it will work. By default, naturally, you will start talking that language. Are you able to follow the sequence? Naturally, you will start doing that. Why? Because you have penetrated so deeper that you have got into an understanding. What is the understanding? You can never say anything. You can never say anything affirmatively. Why? Because in order to affirm, you need to know completely. And if you can never know completely, how can you say it with affirmity? That is ignorance. That is called ignorance. Therefore, Vedanta says, whenever you say, I know, you are ignorant. Whenever you say, I don't know, you are wise. Again, it's a paradox, no? Ignorant person should say, I don't know. And the wise person says, I know. Paradoxically, what do you see? The wise person says, I don't know. The ignorant person says, I know. How to break that intellectual arrogance is the difficulty for an intellectual class. I know compared to the other who doesn't know. Carefully follow. I know. Since I know and you don't know, who is superior, who is inferior? Right away, I am superior, you are inferior. Shankar, solungo. Say that, no. Right? Yeah. Yes, yes, I am superior, you are inferior, you should not say. You are superior, sir, I am inferior, sir, you should say. Yeah, that's why I'm asking. Say, no, I am superior, you are inferior. So, first is, I know. The very fact that I know means in comparison to the one who doesn't know. Therefore, I know I am superior. You don't know, you are useless, inferior. Right away, it's very clear. Clear. That's why you see everybody around you so useless and you are so useful to your own self, not in the eyes of others. Your own self, everyone feels that way. Why? I know. From this, I know arises, I am superior. And then the last nail, I am indispensable. Because I know I am superior, therefore I am indispensable. Now, sir, what will happen if I am not there? Nothing will happen. Everything will continue. Maybe better only. Maybe it will be better off also. So, I know I am superior, therefore I am indispensable. That is the arrogance of the intellect. And what is jnanam? Etad jnanam iti proktam. Humility. And what is humility? By penetrating into the finite, the intellect understands that it is endless. That endlessness is called infinite. When you penetrate into that finite, what appears to be finite, precise, clear, defined at the superficial layer, if you start penetrating, it starts becoming more and more.
Yeah. Unclear.
More and more. So many things that is going into it. So many things that is going into it. So many things that is going into it. A time comes where you can never connect
Anything.
You can never connect everything into what has gone into it. That is ascharya. That is wonderment. Now you connect it to this. Consider the capabilities. I'm reading that. Now we'll just take this paragraph to understand all that we have analyzed. Consider the capabilities involved in strolling down the road. Strolling down the road, na? Stroll means slow walk, isn't it? That's called strolling. Consider the capabilities while you are slowly you are walking. Yeah. Leaving aside things as balance, coordination, you still have to see where you are going, which means you somehow have to make sense out of the ever-changing swirl of motion and color and light and shadow. This is why these philosophers are very confusing, sir. Simple thing, why do they have to complicate? Simple thing they have to complicate. Our understanding of philosophy is like rabbit. Our understanding of what we understand philosophy is like rabbit. Because amongst the animals, rabbit is considered philosopher. Who decided that? God only knows, but it is the philosopher. Yeah, we decided lion is the king, somebody the minister, somebody there, somebody there. Similarly, we decided rabbit is the philosopher. And that philosopher looked at the centipede. That philosopher, rabbit, looked at the centipede. You understand centipede, no? Sometimes those centipedes are few inches long. They have hundreds of legs. Now, the philosopher asked the centipede. What did it ask? How do you know how to keep the right leg and the rendu kaal vechikite with the two legs only we are tripping and falling so many times. Huh? With the hundreds of legs, how are you walking? Oh, perfectly. 3 days later, centipede came to that rabbit and said, just don't philosophize anymore. Stop your philosophy. Why? Previously, I was walking better. With all your philosophy, I'm very confused now. Which leg to take first, which leg to go second. I'm not moving in any direction. Huh? Our philosophy, our understanding of philosophy is like the rabbit to the centipede. So when you read this paragraph, consider the capabilities involved in strolling down the road, leaving aside such things as balance and coordination. You still have to see where you are going, which means you somehow have to make sense of the ever-changing swirl of motion and color and light and shadow. We are tired here only, we are tired. Isn't it? It means it's very clear that we are not yet so ready for this. It's not in our nature. And please understand, if it is not in your nature, it doesn't mean anything, because you can still get to the divine. The idea is to get to the divine. The idea is not to get to this intellectual nature, is not the idea here. Please understand that. The idea is get to the divine using your nature. There are active natures, there are emotional class, there is an intellectual class. Now we are talking about the intellectual class. That's why I started by saying, don't misunderstand it to be a superior class. It is different. That's all. To accomplish this, what to accomplish? Balance, coordination, ever-changing swirl of motion and color and light and shadow. To accomplish this, you have at your command roughly. That's the language of intellect. Roughly, probably. Roughly, I have this much in my bank account. Say specific, isn't it? How much you have roughly? No, specific, isn't it? Here, the language itself is very different. That's the beauty of the very intellectual class. It has like like God and Gods had its own beauty. The active has its own beauty. This has its own beauty. We are learning to appreciate everything here. That's all. We are not trying to prove something as superior or something as inferior. That's not what we are trying. A few who has misunderstood this, they try to establish superiority. Why we don't try that is because all these are part of ignorance and you have to transcend ignorance. All these are part of ignorance. What is it? Whether you are the active class or the emotional class or the intellectual class, you need to transcend all this. So we are not talking about it as superior or anything. We are talking about it a specific exercise for this category of people. And then they say roughly 100 million receptor cells. In India, we are very confused. What is million? Because we know lakhs, crores. What is million? Then we have to study that also. Yeah. So you have to study Indian numbering. you have to study British numbering, and you have to study American numbering. Million is an American numbering. 100 million. And if you have to calculate this 100 million in Indian thing, 100 million in Indian number, how much it will come?
1,000 lakhs.
1 million equal 10 lakhs. 1 million equal 10 lakhs. So 100 million equals 1,000 lakhs. 1,000 lakhs converted into
Crores.
when you convert 1,000 lakhs into crores, how many crores? 100 lakhs is 1 crore. Therefore, 10 crores. So you are a crore pati already. Are you able to follow? You are a millionaire, multi-millionaire, billionaire already. Just the eyes itself. This is how the intellectual understands things. Are you able to follow? He feels I am paripurna, I am full, I am infinite. Why? Because just the eye itself is having 10 crores, no? Billionaire, no, multi-billionaire. No? Then you put everything together. Ascharya, wonderment. Ascharya, wonderment. So he looks at himself with that pride of infinity. He looks at himself. He looks at himself. To accomplish this, you have roughly 100 million receptor cells, the rods, the cones, the retina of each eye. All these calculations happen. For calculation involves time, isn't it? Calculation involves time. And all these calculations happen in a second. And this is only 60%, he says. Just 60% of the eye only. I don't know whether it is right eye or left eye. Yeah. So both the eyes put together again. So when you look at the simple act of seeing, just the act of seeing itself is enough for an intellectual to remember the divine. Just the act of seeing is enough for the intellectual to remember the divine. Every time he's seeing, he remembers the divine. Because how can the finite have such enormous capabilities? Impossible. Are you able to follow? A finite cannot have such enormous capabilities. Therefore, it means that infinite is concealed in finite. It means the infinite is appearing itself as finite. So, wherever the mind goes, the emotional person, devotional person sees God. How does intellectual person sees God? Mere perceptions is enough for him. When he's seeing something, he remembers the divine. When he hears, he remembers the divine. Shrotrasya shrotram, manaso mano, yad vachoga vachagum, sahu pranasya pranaha, chakshusas chakshuhu, atimuchya dhiraha, pretyasma loka amrita bhavanti. Kenopanishad, first mantra. That's why all these Upanishads are for the intellectual class. Because how to remember the divine? You are seeing, no? That is enough. You are hearing, no? Wow, double divine. The 5 Jnanendriyas itself is enough for that person to remember the divine. Therefore, he says in the initial stages in the first paragraph, therefore he says, it's a subtler exercise. It's a subtler exercise because the very perceptions are used to remind oneself of the divine. And what is the remembrance? The effect of remembrance as in wonderment. The effect of remembrance as in Ascharya, wonderment it is. Wonderment, wonderment, wonderment. Wonderment is where intellect is stuck. Stuck means, oof, this is incomprehensible. The beauty of penetration and coming to that is, it will take you to the divine spiritual status, not bring about an inferiority complex. Oh my God, I'm useless, I'm a fool, I can't understand. All this will not come. Otherwise, you feel very inferior not knowing stuff. Here, it takes you to the height. What is the height? The very wonderment itself is almost like touching the divine. A very wonderment. In that sense, it is very close. This wonderment itself is as though you have already
And become that.
almost like that. And then you understand what you got to drop the intellect also. And you got to drop the intellect also. So finite, to sum up, finite is infinite for the intellectual class. And who's the intellectual class? The intellectual class is one who is interested in the abstracts. What is the use of abstracts? He says that and all is your problem. Use and all, I'm not interested. What is the use of it? He's not bothered. And there is a law, and then there is an humility out of that. And then there is an humility. And how does humility manifest? Humility manifests in the language of suggestions, not the language of assertion. Humility manifests as in the language of suggestions. Ignorance manifests in the language of assertion. And how did they get to that? By penetrating, by looking at the finite and penetrating into the finite, and the intellect is wonderstruck, looking at the infinite capabilities of the finite. Intellect wonderstruck, looking at the infinite capabilities of the finite. And that state of wonderstruck at any given point of time, infinite is functioning. Even though we can't say infinite is functioning, is wrong. But then some words we have to use. No, something has to be told. No, so we are using this kind of. So at any point of time, you are producing infinite actions. Remember this through your life. Discover this truth. What you consider as finite is actually infinite in nature. You must recognize your innate nature. That innate nature, that infinite is your nature. So the devotional sees attributes of God. The intellectual attributes of God is attributed to oneself. That is Nididhyasana. Are you able to follow? The devotional sees attributes of God. And what does intellectual do? What is seen as attributes of God is attributed to is oneself. Instead of saying God is infinite, he will say I am infinite. Instead of saying God is pure, you will say I am pure. God is omnipotent. You will say I am omnipotent. God is omnipresence. You will say I am omnipresent. This is God. I am Atma Brahma. This is God. You don't say that is God using this is this practice is called Nididhyasana. Hold that view at any cost. That's how we concluded the topic. Hold that view at any cost. Get to the reality of life. Assert yourself. I am all. I am everything. The microcosm and macrocosm are in me. I am infinite. What? That's all. You just, after that, full stop. After that, there's nothing to, after this, there is nothing to say. After that, because having attained all that got to be attained, after that, what is it? So, all this, the analytical part, in one word, you can call it as wonderment. In one word, you call it as wonderment. Wonderment as in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 69. Ascharyavat pashyati kaschitenam, ascharyavat vadati tadaiva chanyaha, ascharyavat chainamanya shrunoti, shrutvapyenam veda na chaiva kaschit. Veda na chaiva kaschit means you can go on talking about it, you can go on hearing about it, you can go on penetrating and seeing it about it, and yet Veda naiva kaschit. Nobody knows it in full. Why? Because the only way of knowing it is by becoming. Why nobody knows that in complete? Because the only way of knowing it is by becoming it. This is the topic. The finite is infinite. Concluding, I am infinite, I am God. With this, we conclude the topic for today. Then we continue with Shivalinga in the next class. That's a different method. And Shivalinga is a different method, which when we go there, we'll study it. With this, we conclude for today. The book. Anything is there, Venkat? Before anybody wakes up, we will. Before anybody wakes up, we will wind up. We will continue next week.